Hey there, it's Olivia-Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm very excited because I am going to give you a guide to reading Sierra Simone's novels. If you've been around this channel or if you're new here, I would like to tell you that I have been hooked on Sierra Simone's novels. In the past 6 months, there has not been a month gone by where I haven't read at least 1, 2, or more of Sierra Simone's books. And so I just wanted to give you a bit of a guide for where you should start if you're wanting to try something new by her, or a bit of a rundown of some of her books that are out there in the world that you can read and you can try. Before we get started, I need to say thank you to the sponsor of this video, which is Sourcebooks International. So before we get into Sierra Simone's works and where you should start, I wanted to tell you about some of the tropes that Sierra Simone does like to write around, so you can see if she's the kind of author for you. So if you're someone who doesn't mind an age gap in their romance, if you're someone who likes lots and lots of very well written and incredibly good quality steamy scenes, especially steamy scenes that lean into the BDSM vibe, you're gonna enjoy a Sierra Simone book. She also writes a lot of ex-soldier books, which I will get into here. Not every single one of them is an ex-soldier book, but a few are, so I'll point out which ones those are. And she also really likes to write polyamory. That comes across quite a lot in quite a few of her books, and she also really likes to put her religious themes in there, which, don't let that put you off if you don't want to read something religious. It's not in the way you expect, and again, I'm going to get into that when I get down to the books. So those are a few things that you can kind of expect to see within her writing, and without further ado, let me get you into those entry points. So the number one entry point for Sierra Simone's books that I recommend most highly that everybody start with is the American Queen series. There are 3 books in the main series, and then there's a few more that are kind of shorts around this. So the very first one, the one you're going to want to start with, is American Queen. This is an Arthurian legend retelling. There is a character called Merlin in this, but the main character is the one who is called Greer, and she's the equivalent to Guinevere in the legend, and it's about Gwen, who is told that she should never kiss someone because if she does, she is going to set off a series of events. And in this book, she somehow ends up in love with the President of the United States, but she equally ends up in love with the advisor to the President of the United States. And so it kind of ends up being this political romance which is full of polyamory, but also is very messy in the ways in which it gets to that polyamorous point, because what does it really mean to be in love with 2 people? How can you make that choice? And if you are going to form a polyamorous relationship or discuss having an open relationship, how do you start those conversations, and how is that really realistically going to work, especially when you're with someone who is the President of the United States and is very much in the limelight and in the spotlight all of the time. So that's what this book kind of deals with. It does have an age gap to its romance. It does really, really bring on those BDSM, polyamorous vibes, and it's super hot, and it's super steamy, and it's so well written, and it's so very good. But it does not in any which way ignore or forget that it is an Arthurian legend retelling, and there are some elements to this that you're going to see, especially as you've got the President, who's kind of the Arthur character, and then you've got the advisor, who is the Lancelot character. My favourite character is Embry, who is the equivalent to Lancelot, and I just love this so much. I gave it 5 stars, I reread it multiple times, and each and every time it kind of takes my breath away. I immediately, after reading this one, continued on to American Prince, which is the second one. In this book, you get more backstory between the friendship that the president has with his advisor and how he became president. It's from the perspective of the Lancelot character, the advisor, Embry, who is my favourite. And in this one, it really delves into their ex-soldier history. So yes, this is one of the series where the ex-soldier element comes into it a lot. It's again very, very steamy, and again just really ramps up the Arthurian legend elements. In this one, it kind of introduces, or more so focuses on, the connection to Morgana as well, who's called Morgan Le Fay in this particular world, and it complicates the relationships in a way that is just oh so good for the drama and neatly sets you up and ties you in to American King, which is the conclusion of the main trilogy. In American King, you finally get the president's point of view, essentially Arthur's point of view, and it really heavily brings in and ties together those Arthurian legend themes. If it's going to end the same way as Arthurian legend or do something slightly different, I will not tell you. You'll have to find that out yourself, and I hesitate to say too much about this particular book because all the suspense from the previous three build up into a fantastic conclusion. I love this series. From the day that I finished reading it, it immediately became one of my all-time favorite series ever in terms of steaminess. It really brings the level of steamy vibe that just heats my soul in every single which way. It's got some of my favorite characters. Greer is never a damsel in distress, even though she's the one woman in this threesome-ish romance. She is never the damsel in distress. She's always very strong, she's always very wise and knowledgeable. While these books touch on a lot of themes that have to do with relationships, friendships, testing the bounds of what marriage means, it also looks at infertility and also the ways in which people can misuse you and how you overcome that and move forwards from that. It also talks a lot about war, whether it's good or bad, and the politics behind avoiding a war and dodging around it and what needs to be done. I think this is fantastic and spectacular. After you've read this trilogy, there are a couple more shorts that you can read around this, but I highly recommend you do not touch or go near or even read the synopsis of those shorts. Do not even glance at them until you've read this original trilogy. You need to read these first. Then a second entry point, so if you've heard about that and you're not quite sure that's your kind of thing, this may be the other entry point that you need into Sierra Simone's works. This is one of her series that I think is most famous, but I would highly recommend it to you if you are an ex-Catholic, because it seems to be that that works really, really well. You'll be able to catch things that I, as someone who is not an ex-Catholic or has never been Catholic in my life, missed out when reading these books. But even if you aren't Catholic or have any history with Catholicism like me, you'll still be able to really enjoy these books for what they are, and that is the Priest Trilogy. The Priest Trilogy follows the Bell brothers, who are a group of 4 brothers, and each one follows a different one of their love stories. It starts with Priest, then you get Sinner, and lastly you get Saint. But I'm going to do something quite unconventional here and say if you are going to use this series as an entry point, I highly recommend you actually start with Sinner, which is the second book. And that's because I believe it to be the best book in the trilogy, and while they are a series, they do stand as standalones and you can read each and every single one individually. So let me start by telling you about Sinner. You follow Sean Bell, who has never been a good man and doesn't pretend to be. He has a negative history with the church because of what happened to his sister and how that ended, and currently at the moment he's just having as much good sex as he possibly can, but he's also the one who is supporting his mother, who has a terminal illness, and is trying to support her through that and still be the brother who's holding the family unit together throughout it. When he meets somebody at a party and he really, really likes her and wants to see her again. However, after a series of events, he realizes that A, the person that he met at this party who he really likes is actually a nun in training, and secondly, she happens to be his best friend's younger sister who he hasn't seen in years and years and years. And that is Zenny. And on Zenny's side of things, she is a nun to be, and she is going to take the rite of passage to become a nun when the head of the nunnery says, "Hang on, sister, you've never had sex before, and before you commit your life to God and say that you were going to swear off sex, I'd like you to go out and have some really good sex and check, double, triple check, this is what you want to be doing," which is quite unconventional, but apparently that's sometimes how modern nunneries can be these days, and so sets up this story of her deciding that she needs to go out and have sex before she can commit, and Sean, playboy that he is, maybe volunteering as someone who will not get attached. It is a really enjoyable, steamy read. It's very, very steamy, delicious steamy scenes. There's a bit of an age gap in this one, which Sierra Simone tends to like, so you've been forewarned if that's not something you like. And it also has a lot of the BDSM, directional, dominant and sub dynamic in this too. I really like this because I think it's one of those perfectly balanced books where it does talk a bit about faith and what it means to have faith and whether you need to commit your whole life in order to be able to maintain your faith, but largely it's focusing on delivering you some really hot, some really good steamy scenes, but also at the same time showing their genuine connection and relationship forming, as well as tackling this grief storyline that's at the forefront of the story, and how Sean has started to grieve already, because that's what happens with a terminal illness. You don't just grieve after the point of someone being gone, but you grieve throughout the whole process as well. And Sean is really trying to stay in control of lots of elements, and he learns that maybe you can't compartmentalize your life like that. So I think it does a good job of being a very well-rounded story and very balanced in a way that I actually recommend people start with, and then they go on to read Priest, which is the first book in the series. Now, Priest itself is one that I consider to be a bit more lighthearted, a bit more fun, and it draws on the strands of Catholicism a bit more. It does a very good job of tying together a triangle of Catholicism at the top, sex at the bottom, and then the actual relationship that forms on the side. It's about a priest, as the title suggests, and the priest is in a confessional booth when a stripper comes in and starts to confess some of her sins, which he starts to kind of get a little bit hot and heavy over, and maybe they do some forbidden things, and it's about whether he can stay a priest or whether he needs to make the decision to pursue this relationship properly, because right now he's violating a lot of his vows. I think this one is more of the feel-good, fun kind of read where, yes, it's kind of playing on sexual desire and religious imagery in a way that's wonderfully delicious and entertaining to read about, but it doesn't go that deep into the theme of discussing good versus bad and keeping your vow or not. And sometimes it goes back and forth with that a bit much, but you breeze through it quite quickly. It's an easy, light-hearted read. While the characters don't have the most depth to them, it's still a really nice way to pass the time. And then I recommend you move on to finishing the trilogy with Saint by Sierra Simone. I do put this one last because it references events that have happened in the previous two, and in this one you follow a monk who is no saint. He is just trying his best to kind of forget his past and lose who he is and hide in this monkdom, when he comes across an old flame who is visiting the monastery, and it's about what they are going to do when that old flame reappears in his life. What I really like about this one is that you've got gay representation. He is a gay monk and nobody blinks an eyelid at this. It's accepted, the monks all know, and there's no homophobia here. It's not part of the story. And as someone who is an ally to the queer community and also is religious as well, not Catholic but still Christian, it really makes me happy when I get to see representation like this on the page. And I think Sierra Simone does again such a fantastic job of tying together sexual desires, imagery, and really good sex. She writes really good steamy scenes, and I really like the two characters in this and the back and forth between the big decisions that need to be made. Thematically, I would say that Saint falls equally between priest and sinner, which makes it such a good conclusion to the series. And for a very long time, for quite a few years, that was the conclusion to the series, but Sierra Simone has since announced that the fourth Bell brother, because there is 4 of them, is going to get his story. So we need to wait for that to be released. And so we come to the final entry point for Sierra Simone's books that you can read, but I don't really recommend you start here, but you can. So this series is called the Lioness Series. Currently there are 2 books out, Salt Kiss and Honeycut, as well as a prequel that you can download free online called Salt in the Wound. Do not read Salt in the Wound before you've read Salt Kiss. I know I said it's a prequel. Do not read it in that order. Please, 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 you will spoil yourself. What you need to start with is Salt Kiss. So this is a spin-off of the American Queen series. You will understand in the American Queen series that you'll hear a lot about a sex club called Lioness, but you won't actually get to go there. In this book, you get to go there. You're following Mark, who is the owner of this sex club, Tristan, who is a bodyguard. He's an ex-soldier and he needs to find a new job, and he ends up becoming the bodyguard of the owner of this sex club, even though he is quite innocent in terms of sex relationships. He's also touch-starved, which can sometimes happen to some soldiers because it's not a very touchy-feely environment to be in. And What else can I tell you about this one? It does reference some stuff that happens in the American Queen series, which is why I highly recommend reading American Queen first, but you can delve in here. And if you are the kind of reader who is looking for something steamy and you want sex, you want to read it quickly, you want it to be at the forefront of the novel, you don't want to wait for the character relationships to build, you want it to be in your face from page 1, I recommend you start with the Lioness series. We all know there's a reader out there, there's always a mood out there for that kind of thing. We don't judge you, just pick up Salt Kiss, because it will give you what you want. It does take the time to build a relationship between Mark and Tristan, and it is actually very slow burn, which is in contrast to what I was just saying. But while it is in slow burn, it is set in a sex club, so you get to see loads of sex around you, and that just heats up the fire of this slow burn all the more as you slowly read it. It also is a retelling of the Irish legend of Tristan and Isolde, and if you know that legend, you might understand that polyamory is going to come into this series. I wouldn't say it comes in with this first book, but the promise of it is there. This book does you the wonder, but equally the dirty, of ending on a cliffhanger that just makes you hunger and burn for the second book, and I have been hungering and burning for it. But now Honeycut is published and out there in the world, and you can continue to read the series immediately. I will be reading this as soon as I'm done filming this video. I am so excited that it's finally out and arrived on my doorstep, and this is the second book in the Lioness Trilogy. However, between these two, I do highly recommend you go and download that freebie of Salt in the Wound, because if you do, you'll get a bit of a backstory between two particular characters. I will not tell you who they are, and that backstory is steamy. It gives you those steamy moments, and it's again very, very slow burn. Sierra Simone masters the slow burn in this series, and it highlights and emphasizes the cliffhanger of Salt Kiss, and it'll make you hungry for Honeycut all the more. So those are the 3 entry points that I'd really recommend for Sierra Simone's books. She has published quite a lot, so there's definitely a lot more that you can get to. But I will also say a book that I haven't read but I'm really looking forward to, and I know is another very popular one of hers, is A Lesson in Thorns by Sierra Simone. And this one is an entirely different series that is set at the Thorn Chapel Manor, and this one is about 6 children who stumble into the woods and they play a game that changes their lives forever, and in the future, 12 years later, they get reunited, and across the series it's about their romances. They all are set at the Thorn Chapel Manor, and I believe the first one has to do with someone who comes in to sort the library and the person who owns that manor, and it's their romance, and it's also very steamy. But I do think it's going to be another one of her good series. And just to mention some of the other books that she has out there, there is the Ivy Leavold series, which is a 4-book series. I have read all of these. They're historical romances with quite a bit of steam to them and quite a bit of polyamory to them, even though the main couple are not polyamorous. They are in a kind of relationship where they play with other people. It's quite open. I have read these and I had a mixed experience with them, so I actually don't recommend this as an entry point, even if you do like historical romance. Sierra Simone also has a number of standalones, and some of them are very, very good and some of them are a bit mixed. I will leave links to my wrap-ups down below where I review on all of these individual books, so I'll have the title of the book and then a link to the wrap-up where I refer to it, so you can check out my thoughts on the standalones if you think maybe you want to start off with something that's not part of a series, because I know that there are standalone readers like me out there. But it's such a testament to Sierra Simone's books that even though I am typically a standalone reader, I have been running my way through her series and greatly enjoying myself. So that's my guide to Sierra Simone, and I hope you enjoyed those entry points. Let me know in the comment section down below another author that you think you need a guide to of where to start, and I'll do my very best to get one going. I've done one for Alexis Hall, which I'll also link down below. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!